Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavara Gopi Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rayanam Namaskritya. Rayanam Namaskritya. Paranchaiva Narotamam. Paranchaiva Narotamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Ojaya Mudiraye Nasupraya Shurabhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuta Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text number 2. This chapter has a lot of famous verses, and one of the verses is this one, which we're going to read today. Rotvayadi Rajendra Nrinam Shanti Sahasrasa Apashyantam Atmatattvam Grihesu Grihamedinam Shotvayadini Rajendra Nirnam Shanti Sahasrasa Pasyantam Atmatattvam Grihesu Grihamedinam Shotvayadini Rajendra Nirnam Shanti Sahasrasa Apashyatam Atmatattvam Grihesu Grihamedinam Shotvayadini Rajendra Santi Sahasrasha Apashyatam Atmatattvam Grihesu Grihamedinam Shodvayadini. Subject matters for hearing. Rajendra. O Emperor. Nirnam of human society. Shanti. There are. Sahasrasa. Hundreds and thousands. Pashyantam. Of the blind. Atmatattvam. Knowledge of the self. Grihesu at home. Grihamedinam. A person's too materially engrossed. Those persons who are materially engrossed, being blind to the knowledge of the absolute, of the ultimate truth, have many subjects for hearing in human society. Purport. In the revealed scriptures, there are two nomenclatures for the householder's life. One is grihastha and one is grihamedi. The grihasthas are those who live together with wife and children, but live transcendentally for realizing the ultimate truth. The grihamedis are those who live only for the benefit of family members, extended or centralized, and are thus envious of others. The word medi indicates jealousy of others. Grihamedis, being interested in family affairs only, are certainly envious of others. Therefore, one Grihamedi is not on good terms with another Grihamedi, and in the extended form, one community, society, or nation is not on good terms with another counterpart of selfish interest. In the age of Kali, all householders are jealous of one another, because they are blind to the knowledge of the ultimate truth. They have many subjects for hearing, political, scientific, social, economic, and so on, but due to a poor fund of knowledge, they set aside the question of the ultimate miseries of life, namely miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. Actually, the human life is meant for making an ultimate solution to birth, death, old age, and disease, but the Grihamedis, being illusioned by the material nature, forget everything about self-realization. The ultimate solution to the problems of life is to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, the miseries of material existence, birth, death, old age, and disease are removed. The process of going back home, back to Godhead is to hear about the Supreme Lord, His name, form, attributes, pastimes, paraphernalia, and variegatedness. Foolish people do not know this. They want to hear something about the name, form, etc., everything temporary, and they do not know how to utilize this propensity of hearing for the ultimate good. Misguided as they are, they also create some false literature about the name, form, attributes, etc. of the ultimate truth. One should not therefore become a Grihamedi simply to exist for envying others. One should become a real householder in terms of scriptural injunctions. Om Jnana Tividam Disya Jnanam Vinodshara Shakshurunvedam Tasmai Shri Chaitanya Swayam Rupa Kadadi Nama Om Vishnu Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Dinami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurani Vishesha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Jagavita Radha Shivasadi Gaur Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Swamabhava Makila Shruti Sadhamekam Yavadeetam Navitesha Dutanam Samsarinam Karunayaha Puranavimam Vyasasya Durgame Patiminantasya Sakala Paragatir Sakti Pagastikan Santa Sampyavanam. This is a very enlivening part of the Srimad Bhagavatam because this is when Shukadeva Goswami actually begins speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. Up to this point, it has only been Sutta Goswami and Sonaka Rishi having a discussion about the history of how Srimad Bhagavatam came to be. And so there was extensive conversation about first chapter is discussing the scene of Namasharanya with the various saints and sages gathering there to perform a sacrifice, and then they call upon Sutta Goswami to speak on that which will be most beneficial for them and for the entire world. And there's various questions which they put forward to Sutta Goswami, which then Sutta Goswami answers in the chapter of divinity and divine service. So beginning with that chapter, we get a full picture of what the theology of the Bhagavatam will be actually. That first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us really amazing insight into the scientific process as to how Srimad Bhagavatam will purify us if we take it from subject matter seriously. beginning with the verse Shodvayas Shushusho Shodadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syanaha Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nisevana, and then going to Vidyate Hridaya Grantis. We hear of the process, of the entire process of devotional service, which is guided by the process of hearing in that second chapter. And then it's explained that by following this process, Bejare Manayotagre, Bhagavatam and Hoksajam, Sattvam Vishutam Se Mayam, Kalpante Yenam Tani, that many people have attained success by this process, and you can attain the same success by following in their footsteps. And then a discussion on what is the nature of the absolute truth is mentioned. Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti. Bhagavan iti sabdyate. So that's discussed, and then that's specifically highlighted in the third chapter, where the various avatars and incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are mentioned. And specifically what stands out in that chapter, which Jiva Goswami explains, is the Paribhasa Sutra of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Is this verse, Ete Chamsa Kalampum Sam Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So the whole thrust of the Srimad Bhagavatam, anything which we're hearing in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Jiva Goswami explains, needs to be understood in relationship to this verse. And that's because if you go further in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th, 5th, and 7th chapters of the first canto, you find the discussion between, you see Vyasadev's despondency, Narada Muni's instructions, and Narada Muni specifically mentions Naishkarmyam api achutabhava varjatam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam kutat punashashvara bhadramishvare nachapitam karma ya api karanam. That even if one takes up a process of Naishkarmya, or takes up some process of yoga or jnana in order to distinguish reality from illusion, even if there is a philosophy which helps one distinguish themselves as being different from this material nature, if that philosophy is devoid of achutya bhava, then it's really not so useful. It doesn't look very good. Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva what to speak of materialistic activities which your compilation of the Vedas up to this point have emphasized. So, or not emphasized, there's been given space for. So people will take advantage of that. So then Narada Muni tells Shukadev Goswami, Tato yata kinchana yat vibhakshata praga tat krita rupa namabi. Nakati chit klapi chatustita matir, abeta vatata nayor ivaspadam. But any subject matter which you hear, which is devoid of a direct glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, simply agitates the mind, just like boats on water. You can think of a few examples in your own life of subject matters which are devoid of Krishna, how they just agitate the mind. Like, for instance, now there's just over the weekend, there was this bombing of Iran. I just found out about it. And before I was laying down last night, I was just looking into what's going on with it. And you can see that if you watch a video of these politicians speaking about it, they're very, very, very much conducted by the mode of passion. It's like a very, very strong surge of Rajaguna when you see them speak about it. And they're so adamant that if we don't do this, then something bad will happen to us. So therefore we have to knock them out. And if we don't knock them out, they're going to knock. And it's very clear that it's guided by a lower mode of nature. And it's very agitating. I remember when I was in college, I think it was my second to last year or my last year, Donald Trump got elected as the president. And all the information leading to Donald Trump's election, it was very agitating because there was a lot of information going into the world about who he was, and there was a picture painted of him which may be true or may not be true. And it's very agitating. And then even from a more Vedic perspective, if you think about topics like these Upaveda topics, which have their value in the context of Srimad Bhagavatam, but if they're understood independently of the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're very agitating. Things like Vastu, Jyotish, Ayurveda, or yeah, any of these secondary forms of knowledge, they're very agitating because it's basically you're trying to adjust your material circumstances in order to avoid inevitable suffering. And so you have to like wear some type of stone, you have to adjust your house in a particular way, you have to buy a particular house. And you can see it's just very agitating. What to speak of astrology? You know, people are very in anxiety about the influence of Saturn or the influence of Rahu. And it's just like it just consumes the mind of people who give their attention to these things. So Narada Muni is saying that if what you speak is not directly glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's simply going to agitate them. And then he speaks this famous verse, Tadvagi sargo janatava viplavo, yasmin prati shlokam abhadra aprapi, namanyanantasya yashod ikraniyat, shinvanti gayanti grananti sarava. That this Srimad Bhagavatam, it's meant to create a revolution within the misdirected lives of the world's impious civilization. That's the function of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's meant to create a viplava within the consciousness of the living entity. And as we go through the first canto, we get a clear indication of how the Srimad Bhagavatam is turning our perception, because we see the way the devotees in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam respond to reversals in life. It's extremely exemplary. The first example which we get is we see how Arjuna has to make a very difficult decision. And that's very relevant for us because we're practically having to make difficult decisions all the time. That's the nature of material life, is you have two opposing opinions, and if you make one decision, it could offend one party, and if you make another decision, it could offend another party. So you have to make a decision which doesn't offend either parties. And Arjuna is put directly in that circumstance where he has to make a difficult decision. And then right after that, we see that Uttara is put in a situation where she sees that she can't be protected by anything. That's also relevant for us, and that's going to be spoken about practically in two verses. Deha patya kaladeshu atman sena svayatsapi tesam pramato nidanam pashyan api na pashyati. That anything which you try to take shelter of in this world, it's just a fallible soldier. So we see that in that first canto, Uttara, she cries, Pahi Pahi Mahayogin, Deva Deva Jagatpate, Nayan Fada Bayam Pasyat Yatra Mrityu Paraspada. She cries that Krishna, you're my only source of protection in this world. And that sets an amazing example for us. And you can see that she's actually protected. Maharaj Parikshit is also protected. And then as we continue, we see Queen Kunti's prayers, we see Bhishma Dev's prayers, then we see the deliverance of Dhritarashtra, the renunciation of the Pandavas, the cursing of Maharaj Parikshit. And it's just so instructive, the first canto. And then all of this is just being spoken to as a preamble to the discussion which is now beginning. It's setting the background for the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is like, in storytelling, this is a very powerful agent which directors and storytellers will write to have the history of the main plot. So the main plot of the Srimad Bhagavatam we know is Maharaj Parikshit being instructed by Shukadeva Goswami. But to have a background to that, it's very enlivening because then you understand the character of Maharaj Parikshit. You get to see how he responded to circumstances which led him to taking shelter. And you also get to understand the context of the discussion which Maharaj Parikshit is going to have by understanding the instructions of Sutta Goswami understanding the instructions of Narada Muni, understanding the meditation and the vision of Vyas. You get a full picture of why the Srimad Bhagavatam is so powerful within the first canto. It sets an amazing foundation. So when you enter into the second canto, your consciousness has been there's this like term in when you have a well in a village, you prime the well. You understand this? Probably is a different word in Hindi. I'm sure you know the example. You pour water in the well, and that pulls water out. When you're starting to pump, you pull water in, and that pulls water out. It's like it breaks the air bubble basically, and then water starts coming out of the well profusely. So in the same way, the first canto is like priming the well of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's pouring in direct glorification of Krishna. You begin the Srimad Bhagavatam with descriptions of Krishna entering into Dwarka, you seeing him interact with his devotees. So as you go through the different topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, what is the, I'm trying to remember that verse, 12 canto, 12, 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. Atrasarga Visargascha, Atrasarga Visargascha, Stanam Pushanam Uttaya, Manvataresha Nukata, Nirodha Muktir Ashraya. So as you go into the entire Srimad Bhagavatam and you're preparing to hear these 12 topics, the first thing you get actually is you get this ashraya. The first thing you receive in Srimad Bhagavatam is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmad Ashrayata Vitaratas Abhignasvara. There's a direct glorification of Krishna as soon as you enter into the Srimad Bhagavatam. So as soon as you enter into the sanctum of Srimad Bhagavatam, you're immediately sheltered by Krishna. And so then when you start hearing these instructions of Shukadev Goswami, which are quite cutting, if you were to show these instructions to just a materialistic person, they would be extremely offended. Tato du sangha uksrija, Atman Saint, Tato du sangha uksrija, Satsu sajeta bhutiman, Santa eva sichindanti manovyasangam uktivihi. Uddhava says that the nature of a sadhu is to speak cutting words which cut off our material attachment. So Shukadev Goswami, out of affection for not only Maharaj Parikshit, but anyone who will hear the Srimad Bhagavatam in the future, he starts by inserting the operating knife and pointing out directly, this is your problem. So the first instruction we're getting in the Srimad Bhagavatam is, first he's glorifying the questions of Maharaj Parikshit, but the first thing he says, it's very interesting to note, is the cause of all the things which he's going to dissect and rip apart through his philosophical dissertation in the second canto. Practically the whole second canto is Shukadev Goswami speaking, and then there's a transition to a discussion between Lord Brahma and Krishna. But it's a lot of Shukadev Goswami's instructions. We're also going to hear his Mangalacharna, which is very instructive. There's so much which we're going to hear. But the first instruction we get is the nature of materially engrossed people who are blind to the absolute truth is that they have a taste for hearing subject matters which are devoid of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is very instructive for us because our own cultivation of Krishna consciousness, our own advancement in Krishna consciousness, it's primarily based on getting a taste for hearing Krishna Katha. We can evaluate our success or lack of success in Krishna consciousness by our eagerness to hear Krishna Katha. And if we're seeing that we're not getting a taste for hearing Krishna Katha, then we should make it a point to adjust ourselves, to put ourselves in circumstances where that taste can be present. So the main instruction we're getting from this second canto, the first instruction we're getting in the second canto, is that be conscientious of what vibration you're taking in. And the more conscientious we are of that, to see that the majority of our time is spent in hearing and glorifying the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the happier we'll be and the more nourished we'll feel in the process of Krishna consciousness. Tasma ekena manasa Bhagavan sat patampati Shotvayas kirtvayasyascha Deha pujasyascha nityada. That's also in the first section of Srimad Bhagavatam. So actually, I feel like I'm getting a cold, so I'm just gonna stop because I don't want to overextend myself too much. But I would be really happy to hear from all of you, and maybe we can fill in the remainder of our time with discussion. Sorry for ending early, but I am feeling a little bit under the weather this morning.
Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu. I like your point about anything which is devoid of glorification of Krishna agitates the mind, just like the wind agitates the boat on the water. So you gave the examples of Ayurveda, astrology, and Vastu. All this, if we use them separate or independent from Krishna, they simply agitate. Could you elaborate more? Because sometimes devotees also use this. We know many devotees who use this Ayurveda, of course, and
Yeah.
Vastu astrology. We see them all the time. So, what is the right amount of usage, and what is the right context of using them? How are they? How can we use them so that they are not independent of Krishna, but in context with Krishna?
Yeah, I think it's important to first become conscientious of what is my service. If we're conscientious of what my service is, then we can be more aware of what's favorable and unfavorable to how we're serving Krishna. So there's some instances like for like opening a temple, it can be helpful to consult astrology to get an idea of like when's an auspicious time to open, and because you want to start things on the right day, and there's some value to that. Um, but simultaneously, if it's going to be something which is just becoming a neurotic concern, or like for instance, let's say that someone has like some prediction of a bad influence of a planet, that doesn't mean that one should bypass the process of Krishna consciousness in order to take care of the influence of that planet. Like I know one god brother who was serving in an ashram somewhere in the world, and he was told by someone that, oh, you have a bad year coming up, better you leave the ashram. And actually, he left the ashram and then he practically dropped out of Krishna consciousness altogether. So it was a bad year. You know, he dropped out of the process of Krishna consciousness. And I'm not saying that, yeah, I'm the point that I'm making is that his connection with devotional service was at that point in his life highly protected by being in the ashram. And him being in the ashram was allowing to maintain his stance in Krishna consciousness, his strength in Krishna consciousness. And someone who gave this advice, I don't think they were mature enough to see where he was in his own personal development. It wasn't an appropriate time for him to leave, actually. But they said that prematurely and immaturely. And because of that, the devotee practically is left. He's still around, but he's kind of like just floating. And his life doesn't have a sense of accountability to the conclusions of the Guru Prabhupada or the lifestyle of the Guru Prabhupada. You know, take off your Brahmin thread, don't wear neck beads. It's just, that would be an example of astrology being used improperly.
Mm.
Astrology being used properly would be a devotee is conscientious that there's a phase of life which is challenging, and they utilize that time to take deeper shelter of the process of hearing and chanting. Because they see, anyways, my material circumstance is not going to be so favorable, so let me just become more dedicated in the process. Plus, it's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that for a devotee, Prahlad Maharaj uses this word Vishnu Graha, that for someone who's surrendered to Krishna, their life becomes Vishnu Graha, which means it becomes controlled by Vishnu. So for a devotee, the considerations of astrology are very tricky, actually. You can't, any astrologer which you speak to, and they know you're a devotee, they say, yeah, this could happen, but it could also not happen. Whereas with those who aren't devotees, it's a little bit easier to get a sense of what's going to happen. Like for instance, in Radheshyam Prabhu's chart a few years ago, it said he was supposed to get married. That didn't happen. And it's just it's clear that the determination of a devotee to want to serve Krishna, the determination of a devotee to want to give their words, life, mind, body, and senses completely in the service of Krishna. That takes precedent over the influence of the planets, and that's Krishna's mercy, actually. When Krishna sees that the devotee wants to surrender onto him, Devi Yeshu Gunamayi Mama Maya Durataya Mame Vaye Prapadyante Maya Metam Charantite. So these planets, they're just being controlled by the Devi Maya of Krishna ultimately. And that's Maya Dakshina Prakriti Suyate Sacharachram Haintam Dana Konteya Jagat Viparyavartate. And that material nature is being controlled by Krishna. So Maya Tatamidam Sarvam Jagat Advyaktam Mortina. I got them mixed up. All this is being controlled by Krishna. So the influence of the planets is only meant to manifest one's karma. But for someone who's surrendering to Krishna, their life is no longer conducted by the ordinary course of their karmic chart. It's very much it's completely in the hands of Krishna to the degree one's surrendered. That's why it's important that devotees don't settle for a mixed standard of devotional service, and they simultaneously educate themselves as to what does mixed devotional service mean. I think it's extremely important that devotees get a clear understanding of what is the standard of devotional service intended to be given by Srila Prabhupada, intended to be given by Rupa Goswami, Anyabhilashata Sunyam Jnana Karma Vinavritam. Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhakti Uttam. Pure devotional service, Uttama Bhakti. One is a very clear definition of that, and simultaneously one is a very clear definition of what is mixed devotional service. And they're able to distinguish reality from illusion by identifying the standard devotional service which they're practicing, and they're also able to identify the standards of devotional practice in those who may be practicing mixed devotional service. That's not fault finding, that's spiritual discrimination, Vivek Buddhi. Because if you're interested in pure devotional service, you need to put yourself in the association of those who are interested in fully surrendering to Krishna. If you put yourself in the association of people who give a lot of credence to these Upavedas, and they consider that the dictation of those things is important, then the dictation of those things will be important because they're ultimately not being guided by the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're being guided by the principles of the Upaveda. So their faith is lacking. So in one sense, astrology, Srila Prabhupada said, if you know it's going to rain, then bring an umbrella. But simultaneously, the influence of astrology in the life of a devotee it's quite dynamic. It's not as cut and dry as it would be for other people. Plus, to find a qualified astrologer in this day and ages.
From my understanding is that we just take his astrology, use this so that we can perform devotional service better.
Yeah.
Whenever it is required.
Yeah.
In terms of our health or in terms of situations.
Yeah. Jnana Karma Ninavritam. Rupa Goswami explains that devotional service should not be covered by jnana or karma.
But anywhere it interferes with the devotional service,
Yeah, and it doesn't become the primary consideration in the decisions we make. The primary consideration in the decisions we make is the instructions of Guru and Krishna.
Thank you.
I had a practical experience yesterday that this devotee brought up astrology in a phone call. And then my mind got diverted during Guru Maharaj's Bhagavatam class, and I was like, this is useless. What's the value of thinking about these things when my Guru Maharaj is speaking? So it was just a fresh realization that I had yesterday. Like, what's the value of getting so off track? These.
I had similar experiences too. Like my mother, she got my child like when I think I was maybe 12, 14, something like that. Uh, it had like by this age I'm getting married. This will be my child. Nothing happened.
Mm.
And my parents consulted like few astrologers, not just one. I started practicing like gradually maybe when I was 17 something. So just getting to the point that you start devotion service and it could definitely becomes a reality.
Yeah, yeah. Krishna can lift the influence or enforce the influence according to what's favorable for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Is that okay? So, Arnab, do you have anything to say?
Prabhu said that astrology is the most advanced material science.
Oh, really?
Because it contains all kinds of it's math, astronomy, psychology, probably also Ayurvedic things. So it's one sense it's kind of really good, but because it's material science, always coming from Vedas, we should be able to find or understand that it's we should be able to see mistakes with it. With mistakes with kind of taking shelter from the ocean. For example, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was very powerful astrologer.
Yeah.
Actually, he was famous. But when he took sannyas, he practically rejected.
Yeah.
And in his biography, it looks like only few times he would use his skills. And just by seeing one devotee, apparently he said, "You should marry." So that was one instance. And I don't know, there are other.
When he would, in terms of the times he would depart, he would be a little bit conscientious of his departure times.
Yeah. So, like this, it's there. And just like this verse, Laukiki, Vaigiki, Vapi, about the Samitas in it says that in an attempt to please Krishna, a devotee can engage in kind of mundane activities just in order to please Krishna. So, of course, if we can engage in mundane activities in service to Krishna, of course, we can do also Vaidiki. So, both should be there. Some devotees think forget about Vaidiki, let's just working effectively for Krishna. But, it depends on circumstances. But the main point is, main point is about actually becoming a staunch follower of Krishna and spiritual master. I remember this, what was his name? Chandra Roy. This story, I believe it's an art of love story. So, I think somewhere like Guru Maharaj was telling the story of Chandra Roy. He was like a dacoit.
Yeah. I've heard the story before.
Yeah, so he was kind of attacked by wolves, so his mother was looking for astrologer. And then the astrologer, actually, it was a good astrologer. He said you have to get Nartan dust upwards, dust from his feet.
Mm.
to your son's head. So not understand correctly, you know, it's mercy and after that same person he actually got free from the ghost, but he also became like very skeptic Vaishnav. You know, but then the government, whoever it was, they got him
Mm-hmm.
because they were afraid of him before. He was very powerful. They but an astrologer, not the astrologer, but the government, they put him into they call that,
Dungeon.
you know, in the prison which is in the ground.
Dungeon.
Yeah. And his father was also looking for mystic solutions. So he found a tantric who had some kind of CDs, and if he could just go underground and dig like small hole, and through that hole he could get family. So he ended up into that dungeon of Chandra, and uh, he said, yeah, hi, it's me. So now I'm sent by your father. I will just chant this mantra for Kali or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll just go out, you'll be free. But this is extreme example. I don't know, maybe like I will just chant or chant. If I would be in such a situation, but he practically chastised the guy. He said, I don't want to chant any mantra except the holy name of the Lord. I have my guru, I have my mantra, you can go. That's amazing example. So this guy got disappointed, and the guards, they were surprised that he was in that dungeon, but he was chanting, and he sounded quite happy and content. That's also like very, very interesting story. So he was eventually he got caught. Um, this I think Krishna in 11th canto he says that verse. As long as one doesn't develop faith in like a top.
Yeah, then, oh, yeah, it starts with yes, yeah, I think.
Yeah. So as long as that's strong faith
Mm-hmm.
in Krishna's shelter is developed, one one basically is allowed to continue with his whatever he's doing, if he's doing Vaidiki or Malkiki. But yeah, in general, there is tendency that, as you said, people just I'll chant Hare Krishna, but it's not priority.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really, I like the Lokiku. Vaidiki Vyapti. What was the verse?
Yeah. Laukiki, Vaidiki, Bhavik, that's the first line.
Mm.
Any of these, but we can see that Laukiki activities and even Vaidiki, which is according to Veda, like Varnashana, Upamena, these things, they don't produce spiritual advancement.
Yeah.
So now the question is how much we are ready to surrender to the spiritual master's instruction. And if you just use Lokiki and Vaidiki as for not following spiritual master, then what's the use of it? It's totally Actually, devotees should be fearless if you should know. But spiritual master is much more powerful than these things.
Amazing point. And that's why the Srimad Bhagavatam is so important, because it helps clarify this conception in quite lucid terms. There's no.
It's about surrender.
Yeah.
That's why Bhagavad Gita is.
Mm-hmm.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is also about surrender.
Yeah.
King Parikshit surrenders, and pretty much all these Mahajats, they surrender.
Yeah.
So let's see how we can get to that.
Hold on, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. So one doesn't have taste for hearing Krishna Katha, one should adjust, put oneself in circumstances where that taste can come about. So do you have any practical?
Yeah, I have an example from yesterday. Yesterday I got back.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, he said if one does not have
Taste
for hearing Krishna Katha, then what should one do? So yesterday I can be completely frank with all of the devotees and seek their blessings that this mistake can be eradicated from my consciousness. Yesterday I got back and Suvarnabhinu was a little bit tired. Adinath Krishna had jet lag, and I just kind of decided not to go to the temple. And then when I just kind of laid there and listened to the class, but I was halfway through I got distracted, and then after being distracted, I was hoping to go to the evening class, but there's actually no evening class. And then I realized when I was going to bed last night, I also realized this morning that I should have just gone to the temple. It was a mistake that I made. And so I think it's the best way we can get taste is just to put ourselves in the environment where the flavor exists. If you want to eat, then you go to a restaurant, right? So in the same way, if you want to get a taste for Krishna Katha, for Krishna Kirtan, then you should just be in the place where it's happening. That was my realization yesterday, is I didn't put myself in a place where it was happening. I mean, I was able to serve out enough Krishna Prabhu by helping him with his vehicle, but I made a mistake. I should have just gone. I'm a young, able-bodied male. I should have just gone to the temple, but somehow due to some spiritual lethargy, I kind of just relaxed. So I would say just put ourselves in an environment. So I seek all of your blessings that I can give up this spiritual lethargy which contaminates my material mind and senses. That was my realization yesterday. It's just put yourself in the place where it's happening. Don't hold back. Yeah, thank you all very much. Panchakalpatarus. Vaishvebhyo Namah.
Sri Devavrata Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, dear devotees, for joining. Have a nice Krishna conscious day.